There is no doubt in my mind, however Governor Walz did in terms of sincerity, that Vance won this debate.
Does Governor Walz have a problem with the truth? No.
They were talking at one point, Vance wanted to correct something about how Haitians got into this country. And he was right, and the moderators wouldn't let him correct it. It's very interesting.
But at the beginning, the two issues driving the campaign right now are Harris has a big deficit on the economy, Harris has a big deficit on immigration, and Republicans were happy tonight and Democrats a little bit nervous that on those two issues, Vance carried it.
J.D. Vance is much more experienced at this, at public speaking, at defending himself, at pivoting.
It's the audacity. I agree with you that we're in year 9 and no one knows how to cover the audacity. The audacity is that someone should have said, stop it, stop. Are you effing kidding me? And they should have dropped that F-bomb, right? I mean, they should have just, this is a debate. This may be the only chance people have to see the difference.
Yeah, so JD put on an absolute masterclass last night. He was gracious, he was articulate, he was poised, right? The substance of what he was talking about was on point. I mean, it really gives you confidence for the Trump-Vance ticket. And you're going to see a lot of people on the left try to act like Tim Walz won. No, he did not win this. This debate was not close. JD Vance nicely and respectfully bashed his head in. That is how this debate went, right? So let me show you the first clip. Check this out. All right, so we'll start with this. This is J.D. Vance actually introducing himself to the American people, because you have to think about it. The media has portrayed him a certain way. They're trying to get the American people to look at him a certain way. So I think it makes perfect sense that he actually introduces himself to the American people and sets the record straight. So let's start with this. Check this out.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again.
Beautiful. It was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And again, that's important because the media work hard to paint him a certain way. They need him to be bad. They need him to be rough. They need him to be rude, ugly, this misogynistic guy. They need that in order to push their agenda. So that's him right now combating that. So the next clip is also very interesting because the moderators really showed who they are in this debate, right? And I'll show you kind of exactly what I mean. So watch this next clip and then we'll talk about it. All right, so here the moderators try to do a little bit of fact checking, right? But remember, they control the format of the debate. So watch how they try to do this.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990.
So you can see that you saw it, they cut off the mic, right? So again, the agreement is they're not going to fact check. But what she just did, this one right here, is she tried to fact check and then control, because again, they're the moderators, they control where it goes. So she wanted to get that in there and not let JD Vance have anything else to say, right? It's very clear whose side they're on. And I'm sick of seeing these moderators do this. Like, why can't we not just have some neutral moderators who will actually do their job instead of being Democratic operatives? Like everything, and there's a reason Kamala, okay, anyway, you get the point. So now we're gonna go to the next clip. So here he absolutely obliterates Kamala Harris about the border. Because I mean, it's hard to argue you're tough on the border when your administration has let in record levels of illegal immigration. Like, you're gaslighting people. Like, come on now, let's be real.
1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace.
Did y'all see Tim Walz? Did y'all see Tim Walz when he said that? Look at this. Did he just nod in agreement with him?
Drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our border czar, Kamala Harris, has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
So, I mean, again, absolutely just ripping them apart, but in a respectful way. I mean, the guy's, he's gifted, right? He's absolutely gifted. And it's nice to see that, right? Because even with this debate, I mean, it wasn't as much of a 3-on-1 as ABC, but it was still a 3-on-1. It was just a much less heavy-handed 3-on-1, right? Definitely a 2-on-1, but arguably a 3-on-1. Again, and a lot of what they talked about, and I'm not going to show you the whole debate because a lot of it was not really, like, a lot of it was boring and crappy, right? But some of the good parts, some of the good points. But if you want to go watch it, I mean, feel free to go watch the debate. I'm not saying don't go watch it, but yeah, I mean, he really ran through them in just a beautiful way. It's really nice. It's just so, it's pleasing to the ears, like I said. And I think something good he did, and for me, I felt, like I said, I think he did really good. I felt he was a little too nice, but then you also have to think about it. A lot of women are turned off by how direct Donald Trump is and to the point. Donald Trump isn't as gracious or as polished as JD Vance is. So I think there's a good chance that people are underestimating the effect that this will have on a lot of women who are on the fence, right? So again, I think overall JD Vance did his job. Yeah, so listen, here we are about to go to JD Vance's closing statement. So let's listen to what he has to say here.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Beautiful. It's beautiful, right? Closing statement, beautiful. The best closing statement I've seen in my lifetime. Now, I'm young, okay? I'm not that old, so I haven't been around for a lot of politics, but this is the best debate performance I've seen, and that was the best closing statement that I've seen in a debate, right? And it makes you, again, to me, it's like, okay, I'm comfortable with him being the vice president, because I was up in the air at first about him being, the vice presidential pick, because I didn't know anything about him. I was more leaning towards Vivek. Right? I was more comfortable with Vivek. I'd heard him speak more. I knew more about him. The more I hear J.D. Vance speak, the more I'm like, that was a good pick. And I think we need to give Trump credit for picking J.D. Vance. He knew something we didn't know. So I think he deserves credit for that, right? And it's paying dividends. It's absolutely paying dividends. So that's all I got for this video. I will see you guys in the next one. Like, share, and subscribe. Y'all have a wonderful day. Stay safe.